and welcome everyone to the Evony Discord training room. We're going to go over some defensive builds, really, for Battlefield and some March setups, just some key pointers for people wanting to join battles with JDK, but also you can take this back to your alliance and use it there. So I know at the top of my list here it says generals, but really it would be a sin not to bring up the most important part of your defense, which is your research. And what everyone should be doing, no matter what level you are, no matter what part of the game you're in, you should be upgrading your academy to the same level as your keep and completing all of the research in it. It's more important than building troops. It's more important than your gear. That's more important than leveling up your generals. Everything you do should be focused on the academy first. Once you hit K36, you then get to focus on the military academy as well. But for PvP purposes, there's obviously there's very few things in these beginning trees that are important. Obviously, you want to complete the defense and military trees. The medical aid, I believe, has some healing speed up research, which is also important for battles if you're trying to push for a high score for like all stars or the top 200 achievements to get your wings. But then you get to the end here, military advance and defense advance, and you must max out these trees. It is insanely different if someone has these trees completed and someone doesn't, especially the defense advance. Evony has gone a lot more defensive focused with this tree. So you see in battles, even in JDK, we tend to sit and tank rallies at the beginning of battles to wear out the enemy's high-tiered troops, because defense is so powerful if you're cross-raining each other or sending reinforcements during rallies. And the reason is that HP and defense that you gain from these trees is massive, especially for players who don't have that high of buffs yet. This is the easiest way to make your defense strong. So now we can move on to the actual training here. First, your generals. Your wall generals are a critical part of your defense, and I have some recommendations for larger keeps. Generally, what I see is a lot of people use William Marshall as their main defense general, and that's because he's a pretty balanced general. He gives you the buffs that none of his buffs are going to be wasted. And a lot of people will then add Leo as the assist, or they'll switch them and put Leo as the main, and that is because Leo gives, I believe, the highest siege attack for a defense general. Now, Lautaro, he's a very solid general as well, and I see people want him a lot because he's got good ground and overall defensive buffs. So for my recommendations, if you're going with one of those three as your main, you're not going wrong. And I believe Lautaro pairs with either one of them, so you could make a combination out of all three of those generals. So let's say you have a different general that you've already added a couple red stars to, and I'm showing you this now, and you're thinking, I need to delete this general and buy another one. Don't do that. But what you want to do is try to start building up one of these generals, and at some point it will pass the general you have, and that's when you make the change. So if you've already got, say, a Boudica or another defensive general that you've invested in, you've worked on the specialties, keep them there for now, but don't invest any more. I mean, ultimately, the best general is going to be the one that you can get 10 red stars on. But do you want to put 10 red stars on a weak general instead of being patient and getting one of these better generals? For trap keeps, this is the T1 trap, people with a low amount of high tier troops on defense and a big T1 wall of mounted troops. I see a lot of Leonomosas and Queen Boudikas because they give the very high mounted troop HP percents. And everyone's going to tell you, but flat mount refines work for mounted T1, right? Yes, but every little bit counts, and if you can get 70-80% more HP from one of these generals, that's going to make your T1 mounted stronger as well. Not as much as a flat mounted refine will, but still it still helps. So I'm going to pause there and let you guys know this is classroom setting, right? If you have a question, let me know. Any questions on defense generals? Any questions on other generals you think should be on this list?
One question, and that is if we have we have the T1, but we're starting to build up more of the higher two, especially ground. Is it better to have Leo with William Marshall or add Laturo in to get that boost on the ground defense?
Yeah, good question. It's definitely a personal choice and what you're going to continue building. I will say that once you hit a certain size of keep, you are going to be getting hit by siege first, always. So your ground troops are great, but if you're big enough, nobody is really going to try to solo ground march you. Now, they may hit you with a ranged march, which is where your ground is going to come into play. But first they have to get through your T1 wall, and it really depends on how big of a rally you're getting hit with. My personal choice is to go with Leo main, William Marshall assist, because I know I'm always going to get hit by siege before anything else. At your size, you could go Lataro and then Leo assist. You're still going to get decent siege attack buffs. But I think they're pretty equal. It just comes down to preference and what you want to build more of in your keep. If you do go to All Stars or any Shalom's, that whatever it's called now, siege is going to be sent at you, especially when we're reinforcing you. So I think Leo has to be in there somewhere, or the new general that nobody has yet. I don't remember his name, but I think they only released him once, so I don't know anyone that's got a 10-star of that guy. But good question, though. Anything else before I move on?
That's what I was going to ask. Does it matter who's main over the other?
Yes. So you will get a much higher siege attack percent by putting Leo as the main, and you will have much higher other buffs by putting William Marshall or Lataro as the main. So it does matter. In that situation, which one can you get more red stars on the fastest? Which one has, which two have the specialties the furthest developed?
Out of the T1 trap.
As a T1 trap, it does matter because one of them will give you higher mounted troop HP. Leonomosa gives the highest, from what I understand of everything I've looked at, the highest HP for mounted troops. So you would want him as the main. That way you get all of the advanced, all of his main skill from your red stars. But
okay.
Boudica gives almost as high mounted HP and various other buffs as well, while Lina Mosa is just buffing your mounted. So really, if you're using other troops in with your T1 mounted, let's say you're a 2 billion power player, not just a 1 billion T1 trap, Boudica would be the better option to use as the main general, because she buffs other troops as well. I mean, Lina Mosa might buff ground troops, but Queen Boudica will give you other defense general buffs that Lina Mosa doesn't, because he is a mounted attack general, but his skill doesn't say while attacking, which is why you can use him on your wall. All right, next let's look at some gear here. So if you're a spender, this is pretty much common knowledge, but the best gear set for your wall general is going to be the choreo set. If you have the money and you are able to full cake and get all of the supremacy gear, there's no other set right now that's better for your wall general. So that should be your primary focus. If you are joining any battlefield, if you're going to take hits in SVS, you must work on this set for your general, your defense general. It's more important than your attack. If you're big enough to take hits, you will lose. The risk of losing points by getting attacked is way bigger than the chance at hitting someone and gaining points, right? Because you could get rallied, you could get hit by a K44, K45, something like that. That's going to zero you, and your defense is more important at that time than your attack is. So I highly recommend everyone start with this set first before you build your attack sets. Most people can build conquest gear, the three pieces on the right of your general. And so once you finish those with your choreo, then you can start the conquest gear for your attack generals. But start out with choreo, and specifically the choreo bracers, because those add the greatest siege range increase than all the other pieces. What that means is that your siege is going to attack the enemy siege first. On defense, the defender always gets the first turn when it comes to siege versus siege, unless you have a shorter range than they do. So as long as you have these choreo bracers on your wall general and you've given it 5 stars, you will always hit the attacker's siege first and save yourself a lot of troop losses. If you are not a big spender, if you haven't bought a single piece of Civ gear, this is the setup I recommend. I excluded the basic attributes, but if you want to take a screenshot of this, the reason I recommend this is because it gives some of these pieces don't give the defense or the in-city troop buffs, and instead they're the attacking set. But in looking at the buffs, what we typically see from our trap keeps and even the bigger keeps, the buffs that come from these pieces are more important than the buffs like a 10% range troop defense that you get for one of the other pieces. It's just my opinion. You can always build a different set, but this is the set I'm going to ask all of JDK to build if they don't have the choreo set. And of course, you want to upgrade this to the Parthenian gear when you're able to. But just keep in mind, if you upgrade one piece to Parthenian and the other 5 are still Achaemenidae, you lose the 6-piece set bonus. So try to do them all at the same time. Make sure you have the resources or the materials to upgrade them all at once. Any questions on the gear choices? Pretty simple. And if you do come across questions, if you see a different piece, you want to do a different setup for your defense, For example, the Achaemenid Axe, which is giving you siege attack, you could go for the spear to give your mounted troops more attack. That's a good choice. I'm happy to help answer that question, take a look at your defense, and make my recommendation for that as well. All right, refines. So if you are under 5 billion power, and this is mandatory for JDK, all of your refines must be flat mounted. If you're not sure what the difference is, if you look at the top set of 6 pictures here, and then the bottom set, you see that siege machine HP %, and up here we have mounted troop HP flat. Flat just means there's no percentage. It's adding a flat stat to your troop. And the reason for this is if you're under 5 billion power, you're probably not in the 3K buffs range. You're probably not in the 2K or 2500% buff range. You might be coming up on 2000%, but I can guarantee you, if you are in a battle with me, in a battlefield or an SBS, the enemy will be able to fully debuff your defense buffs. So what that means for you is you could add 30% to each of these stats and get 120% attack, but really you're only getting 60% mounted troop attack if you were to use a percentage in this instead of the flats. And you're using a T1 wall, which is doing most of your fighting. We're going to get into the troop layers after this for defense, but for your T1 wall, you're not just going to be building T1s. You should build also T2s and 3s. So these flat refines are boosting the majority of your troops. Let's say you have 500 million troops, and 250 million of them are T1 mounted. The refines here are specifically helping half of your troops, whereas if you went with a siege machine attack, you're helping maybe 10 million troops instead of 250 million. So it's very important that you do your refines based on your troop makeup. And once you get out of that 5 billion power range and you have enough high tier troops to take hits with your high tiers, then you can consider, not mandatory, but you can consider switching to percentages. Now this is the setup I use. Over 5 billion, I go half flat mounted refines and half siege and ground % refines. And the reason for that is, like I said, I get hit with siege all the time. And the ground troops, my high tier ground troops, do a lot of fighting as well, because I have T15 that give up a lot of points. If somebody were to come in with higher buffs than me and hit me with T15 or even T16 ground, I need my ground troops to be able to absorb the hit and deal damage back. And this is at much higher levels. So you're talking at 10 billion power. That's when your ground troops, your high tier ground troops, are going to be very important, and your siege HP and defense is also very important. So if you're closing in on 5 billion power, you're there. You can reevaluate your refines. Make sure you have at least half of them as flat mounted, and then you can build the rest based on your defense. So let's say you didn't build a lot of siege. Let's say you know that you get sieged a lot and you built a heavy ground troop defense with some ranged. You may consider going with more ground than siege and go with 3 ground defense and 1 siege per piece. But either way, the main point here is you have to have at least 3 pieces of gear with full flat mounted refines.
Each of those boxes goes to the above gear, correct?
Yeah, they might be a little out of order, but for the 6 pieces on your general, you have 2 that give attack buffs, 2 that give defense, and 2 that give HP. So on one of your attack pieces, like your weapon, you would go full flat mounted attack. I believe it's weapon, armor, and boots on the left. So the armor and the boots give defense, and then the helmet and the legs give HP. So you would pick your helmet or your legs to give flat mounted, and then the other one would give percent siege. Well, for you, I know your keep size, so you would be flat mounted on everything.
Yeah. Can you scroll up a second?
Yep.
To the gear.
You want Choreo or the Ecumenidae?
No, the Ecumenidae for right now.
Sure.
So, okay. Alrighty.
When you're over 5 billion power as well, like I said, it really depends on your keep makeup. You could go with siege, flat siege, HP, and defense, and even attack if you build a lot of T11 and below. So T11 siege is very important, and I'll cover that in the troop makeup, the troop layers. But this is going to be This is going to be your biggest siege layer. This is going to be a critical part of your defense if you're a big player. So you gain more with flat refines on the T11 and below siege because of the debuffs, and also because they are right at that turning point where percent gives more stats than flats do. So really, you could gain slightly more with percent, but it's going to get debuffed, and you'll gain more in the end with flat refines. So instead of using the ground troop defense and siege machine defense percents, you could go siege machine defense flats. And you could do the same thing if you build a ground troop T1 wall. That's very viable as well, especially if you want to remain a trap keep. You can just keep building out your T1s. You can get a billion T1s and of all types, right? And then you want all flat refines. Any questions on the refines before we move on? Alrighty. So troops. This is my request to the JDK members who are going to be joining rallies and sitting in our rally hive in our battles. So for your mounted, there is a 200 million troop minimum for the T1s. The preferred amount, and I know this sounds ridiculous to players who are, just approaching their 200 million or just starting to work on their 200 million, but 1 billion T1 is the preferred amount. And that is because there are players out there with 4,000 plus buffs. Your 200 million mounted are just food. If you can get them up to 1 billion, you'll be able to absorb heavy rallies as long as you have reinforcements. But it's 200 is the minimum for solos, especially if you're fighting someone in the 2k to 3k buff range. Above that, 200 million is just not enough. You also want to build out your T2 and T3 mounted, and the reason for that is your flat refines are still helping those tiers as well, and you could get 3 layers that are helping you deal damage and absorbing hits, and this drastically improves your defense. We all say start with the T1. Yeah, the T1 is the most important, but once you get T1 built, start building up your T2s, then your T3s, and then start again with your T1s. If you are under 5 billion total power, your lower tier mounted from T4 and up on defense is, well, anything T4 and up, you really don't want to have more than 100,000 in your layers, because if you get hit by a ranged attack, that's just easy points for the enemy. What you would want to do is have a big high tier layer that you can ghost and unghost when they attack you with ground. But anytime they're not attacking you with ground, you want to hide those high tier mounted. Once you're above 5 billion total power, like I mentioned before, they usually send siege at me first. So having those heavy mounted layers is okay at that point. But you really need the siege to back it up first, because they are going to send ranged at you. You want your siege to be able to destroy their ranged quickly before they have a chance to get through a second or third turn on your troops and clear all your mounted. But even then, you want to ghost as many as you can before a ranged attack hits you. Siege. So for all players, T1 through T10, you want 1 million of each minimum. The preferred amount, you're closing in on that 5 billion power range, is you want to start pushing those layers up to 10 million. And you'll see online everyone's saying, but T1 doesn't hit anything. T1 is kind of useless for siege, and it's true to a point. But your T1 is also going to be an absorption layer. You could actually build that out to 100 million, 200 million. And what this does is once the enemy siege rally gets through all of your siege, they will start attacking your ranged. So having a big T1 layer will potentially stop them from progressing through to your ranged before, say, they send a mounted march at you. Typically what you'll see is multiple siege rallies on you until your siege and ranged are all dead, and then they come in with the mounted or the ground, or sometimes just ranged. But yeah, 1 million is the bare minimum for each layer. You need enough in it to be able to clear or deal a decent amount of damage to the enemy archers that they send. T11 is a 5 million siege minimum, and this is true even for trap keeps. So you could get hit by siege. Most people will send siege at you. Like I mentioned before, your siege always goes first. So what people do is build out a huge T11 layer to counter enemy siege attacks. We also use T11 quite a bit in our rallies, so having that extra troop count will help with that. Once you hit 5 billion power, you got to start pushing that T11 up to 20 million. And this is it's all a work in progress. I don't think everyone's going to hit, 200 million or 1 billion T1s, T1 mounted and all of that by tomorrow. But just know this is your goal. This is how you want to build out your layers to have a solid defense. So 20 million T11 is preferred, and that is because we use it in our rallies. You're going to be burning, when you get that size, you're going to start sending 4 million, 5 million in a single march. You just see real quick, 3 or 4 marches, and all your T11 is gone, and this compromises your defense. So T12 to T15, your high tier siege is a 3 million minimum. This will stop you from getting soloed, but a solo siege shouldn't be able to clear all of your siege if you have 3 million per layer. And what this does is your T13 and 14, you're basically attacking with 6 million siege against their highest tiers, and you get to go first, right? So it's the minimum amount to actually clear bigger marches for the enemy. You can at least weaken the remaining siege amount that they have so that they can't clear through your layers easily. 10 million is preferred. I think 10 million is really the goal for any layer of your siege, your mounted, all that. When you get to the big size, right, the 10 billion power plus, you got to start pushing to 10 million troop layers. For trap keeps, it's T1 through 14 is 1 million across the board. And start with your lower tiers, because you will get hit by siege first, and if you've only got 1 million T14, that's easy points for an enemy. They will win the point exchange. But once you have, 1 million T13, T14, and then you've already got your 1 million T12 and T11, you can actually absorb and really damage the enemy siege before they can. You'll probably break even on points as long as you have your academy research maxed out, your HP and defense. All right, so ranged, you can never have too much ranged on defense. T1, your low tiers, again, we're building out our low tiers here because it's basically a free attack. They're the last tier to get hit by the enemy, so you get the most turns with your low tiers. And T1 ranged, once you finish your mounted and your ground, you'll build your range to T1, or your range T1 to 100 million. 200 million is preferred. You could push this to 1 billion if you wanted, if you had the resources, but really the priority is mounted. Then you can choose between ranged and ground, which T1 layer you want to build up next. And again, the T2 and 3 are just as important, so 25 million minimum, 10 million minimum. T4 through 15, you want to get to 3 million minimum. And the reason I come up with this number, again, is because you could get hit potentially by a 6 million troop march. And if you've got 4 high-tier layers with 3 million each, well, you've doubled the size of that 6 million troop march. So they may have double your buffs, but the reality is you guys are going to break even on the high tiers. You might lose some points on the high tiers, but your low tiers will be able to make up the difference. So, and I'll tell you, for the PvP marches, for your ranged march setup, T12 is what you use for the attack. So it's going to be like 25% T14, 25% T13, and 50% T12, maybe even higher. I use 60% T12. So you're going to actually want to build this layer up, the T12 layer up even more, similar to like your T11 siege. You just keep building that T12 because you will burn through all of it when you're joining rallies. Trap keeps, pretty simple, 1 million across all tiers. So ground is the same. With ground, the only difference is on attacking, you typically use your T13. Some people even go with T14 as their biggest layer. So I do 20% T14, 60% T13, and 20% T12. So for that reason, you want to build up your T13 higher. So if you're going to copy the March setup that I use, then you want T11 siege built up, you want T12 range, you want T13 ground. For mounted, it's T13 as well, though some people build their T12 higher instead of the T13. It's preference at that point. And again, trap keeps 1 million all tiers. So that's all for troops. Any questions on this? No, I cannot fund your troops' resources.
So is it T1 build from T1 up pretty much to these levels? Is that what you're...
Yeah. If you hit K35, right, and per my guide on building up your keep, if you hit that K35 mark, you're starting to build your subsidy generals up and your gear for your subsidies, and you're ready to refine your defense generals for flats. You build your T1. You don't need to build your high tiers, just enough for a single march at high tiers. And and start packing on the T1s. Again, you know, for us, we're watching this now. I don't know if anyone else on some other server ever is going to watch this recording, but we have to play defense because we're going to be fighting older servers, bigger servers. So yeah, the best defense is going to be your low tiers and then getting rained with high tiers.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
So at my level, it's not worth me worrying too much about building any troops. Just keep focusing on building my keep up and research. And that's basically the best I can do.
Yeah, around K33, you can start building up. I would start building your PvP marches around K33. So you know you're going to be using T12s, 13s, and 14s. At K33, I believe you have T13, right?
Yep.
So you can start building up those T13, enough to fill a march. Once you're able to fill a full march with your T13s and 12s, right, it would be about a 60-40% split, 60% T13s. Well, for range, it's the opposite. But either way, when you have your single march built, you don't need to build more than that because it's just a liability, right? And let's be honest here. You're K33. If I hit you, you're getting zeroed. So the high tier troops are just going to give points. You just want enough to send a march out, and you could ghost your other attack marches and let your low tiers do the defending. Well, really, you wouldn't have your low tier yet. You just don't build that until you're K35 or K36. But the priority for you is Academy and Keep until you hit K35. That's when your troops are going to start actually being able to win fights. And
cool, thanks.
You can keep a mounted march for monsters if you need to. That's, of course, you need that, but really, that's it. Somebody else is going to be killing your big Arctic barbarians and things like that, right? So, yeah, build one march for PvP, maybe two, something that you can ghost easily, and save your resources.
Cool, thank you.
All right, no problem. So now I'm going to switch over to my account here. Let's talk about Monarch gear. So if you haven't already, you should have sets for each type of attack march. If you're in a rally team like mine, we might rally too fast for you to switch between them. So you'll also need the all troops set, and the last one is going to be the defense set. So let's just take a look here at the range set, and I'll show you the difference between the defensive and the offensive. So if I'm looking at the pieces on offense, the attack piece has marching range troop attack, 86%. The troops in your keep are not marching, so this piece does not help you on defense. Whereas a piece like this, the older piece, gives range troop attack to all range troops and a flat stat, right? So on defense, this piece helps you and the other one doesn't. So when we join battles and we know there's big keeps on the other side that are about to start rallying us, we throw on our defense set. I like to use the all troops defense. So all troops attack 30%, the older piece, because I have a lot of every type of troop. If you are a T1 trap keep, or even if you're not a trap and you're in that 2 billion to 3 billion power range, and you rely heavily on your mounted to defend, then you'd probably go with the thunder staff, right? The older mounted gear instead of using these the daggers, because again, the dagger does not help you on defense. So same thing applies to the middle pieces here, your Grail and your decoration, the top right piece, if you're defending, none of these pieces are going to help you because it says when attacking. That might not be true. I'm going to have to verify that because it could be when attacking on defense. So I'll test that out and let everybody know. But otherwise, yeah, the healing crown is the best to go for if you're going to be healing in battles. Otherwise, if it does work, all troops is always going to be my recommendation, unless you're a T1 trap. And then you would use the 30% mounted, or I'm sorry, these are debuffs. So if you're a T1 trap, you'd want to debuff ranged, because ranged are what's going to be attacking you. If you have a decent amount of siege and they like to hit you with siege as a T1 trap, then you're going to debuff their siege attack. So set this gear set up for what is going to be attacking you. And same thing for the rings. You want to debuff. I debuff all troops, but you can debuff siege defense or ranged defense. If you're small enough and people like to try to solo you with ground, then you would debuff the enemy ground defense. Any questions on the gear sets? Again, you want one for each type, but you also need an all troops and a defensive set. Cool. Let's see. Subcities. So we talk about debuff generals. Everybody should be building their debuff generals. Red stars do help your debuff generals. Switch back to him real quick. Here, I'll do it for my generals page. So this one has the Parthenian. I'm going to switch over to one that has the Ecumenidae. The easy way to do this is to look at the debuffs and pick the piece that has 2 debuffs. So you see here, enemy ground troop defense and enemy ground troop HP. That's going to be the most amount of debuffs that you can get, is finding the piece that has 2. But there may be exceptions where, for example, I went with the bow here to debuff enemy siege attack, rather than the axe, which debuffs ground and HP, I believe, or the spear, which does ground troops defense and ground troops HP, because I don't get hit with ground very much. If I'm soloing somebody, it's different. I maybe need to debuff their ground troops. But on defense, because we're talking about defense here, I go with the bow on most of my subs to debuff the enemy siege attack, because that's, in almost all situations, you're going to get hit with siege first, unless you're small enough to get soloed by the ground march. And I believe there's one other piece where I did the change as well. Here. So I went with the range troop debuff. Now you could go with the double debuff of the other Ecumenidae ring, but most people are going to hit with ranged, and most people have the highest buffs for their ranged troops over the other types. So that extra ranged troop attack debuff is, in my opinion, better than, say, the enemy ground troop HP and enemy mounted troop HP. The reality is you will, at your level, be able to debuff the enemy ground troop and mounted troop HP by 50% with just your generals and whatever other gear you're using, like the choreo set or any other Ecumenidae pieces that we built here. Just from that, you won't need to use this ring. So ranged, though, on the other hand, could easily be much higher than you can debuff by 50%. So I would recommend with going like 2/3 of the ranged troop attack debuff, and the other 1/3 of the ground and mounted troop HP. And for the rest of the pieces here, just go with the double debuff. So the only ones you need to think about are the ring and the weapon and what type of debuffs you want there. Everything else is just the double debuff, and that's actually the most, in my opinion, the most efficient for your gear, the best debuffs. So yeah, debuffing ranged attack and siege attack is very important for your defense. And you should have this set of gear on every single sub-city mayor you have. Upgrade them to the Parthenian when you can, and equip your debuff beasts to your sub-city generals. So if you have them, let's check here. Like the Bird of Hurricane is clearly for monster hunting. You don't need to equip that one to a sub-city. But when you get down to these other ones, the ones that give you the seals buffs, enemy ground troop HP minus 22%, enemy mounted troop HP 20%, these are the ones you want to put in your sub-cities. Any questions on debuff generals or debuffs and what I mean by the 50%?
Just curious on what skill books you put on your sub-city generals.
Yeah, good question. If you have bought the packs for the debuff skill books, I think I bought one and I used them, but I didn't buy any more after that. Those are the ones you want here, right? Debuff enemy ground troop defense. But the other buffs here really don't help you. So I put a construction book and training speed book because I always lose my sub-city troops on solo attacks. But the construction book is just to help your sub-cities continue to build up. They're really, gold production, training capacity, rebirth, they really don't help you all that much. Maybe rebirth if you don't have that defensive debuff book that you have to buy. Rebirth might be good if you solo attack people a lot and your sub-city generals die. Otherwise, the gold production is it's so minimal, 45%. You can use it if you want to. It's not critical to defense or to PvP. If you want to use that book, find a gold production general and put that book on them and switch them out when you're not PvPing.
Yep, thank you.
And no problem, good question. And just a reminder, on your debuff generals, these specialties do apply. So ground troop HP and ground troop defense, this is only applying to your sub-city troops, which is kind of nothing because your sub-city troops are pretty weak. But the enemy troop HP minus 10%, that's huge because that goes against all of the enemy troops when you send your subs. And on the final skill, usually has a debuff as well. You want to build that, level that up as well. When you look at refines, you don't really need to refine your sub-city gear. I usually just do the free ones until I find something that has like a troop capacity or troop training speed. If you want to go all out, the other option would be to go with flat refines of like ground mounted or ranged because your sub-cities don't produce siege. So the flat buffs do help them, but it's still so minimal that it's not gonna save the day. All right, the last thing, and we got about 9 minutes before I end this. We're going to talk about Blazons. There are 2 types of Blazons for each troop type. So you have the set bonuses of this one give you when attacking, it debuffs the enemy, It gives you ground troop, attack, defense, and HP. See if I have any of the... Yes. The set bonus for the other set of ground is when defending, it gives you slightly more debuffs. So let's compare apples to apples here. So you're talking about 5% more debuff of each stat versus and 5% more attack. I tend to do much more attacking than defending, so I get more benefit from using the attacking set. If you are a trap keep, you would clearly go with the defensive set, for ground at least. Same thing for ranged and for siege. There's a while defending and while attacking. Mounted is the only one where it has a while attacking and a while attacking monsters, right? So the soul set here. Soul set has mounted troop HP on monsters, so you can get some pretty decent buffs here. I would say in this case you could build 2 sets of gear, a monster set and an attack set for PvP. The other ones, I think you should pick one or the other and work on it. Once it's finished, then you can build the second defensive set or the offensive set. If you are a 5 billion power plus player, the difference in defensive buffs that you get from Blazons, I believe, is so small that you should just go with the attacking set. Your that 25% debuff from the defensive set is not going to make or break your defense. What is going to matter is if you have people reinforcing you. And a rally setter is almost always going to have very high buffs. So at best, you're not reducing it by enough to make that big of a difference. So go with the attacking set, make our rallies stronger, and we have to out-rally them. So I could go over how to select which Blazin you want. Really, there's the attributes that you can get from upgrading these. You want to try to get some specific things, whatever it is that you're using that set for. So if it's a defensive set, you would pick mounted troop while defending, right? When you're using an offensive set, you can use the flat mounted troop attack, which will buff you on defense and on offense, or the marching mounted troop attack, which counts towards solo attacks. It counts towards attacking monsters. It also counts towards joining rallies. So if you went with all in rally mounted troop attack, you would your solo marches and your monster attacks wouldn't be benefiting from it. So I recommend going with the marching mounted troop attack. Really, it's the high-end players that have a set for rallies, they have a set for solos, they have a set for monsters, and they have a set for defense. Well, they probably don't have a set for defense if they're that big. So if you are upgrading them, like this one for example, I'm trying to build an attack set. I unlocked 2 mounted troop HPs, it was looking good, and then I got a mounted troop HP on monsters. This Blazin to me is now dead. Once I get another one to replace it, which I believe I have one, I will disassemble this one or use this one to upgrade the next one. I won't keep it because it's not worth going above level 10. And once you hit level 15, you'll unlock that 4th stat. At that point, you can make the same decision. Do I want to keep building this one? Are the stats on there good? Or do I want to find another one to start upgrading instead? So if you're starting a new Blazin and you look at the stats at the basic attributes, you would never, for example, you would never upgrade this mounted troop training capacity. Really, none of your Blazins should have the training capacity on it. you might have to click a few more times when you're building troops, but this gives you no benefit in combat, so don't waste a Blazin on with a training capacity. So find one that has the stats you're looking for and upgrade that one instead. Any questions on Blazons? All right. Got a few minutes left. Any questions on defense in general that maybe you wanted to see that I could help answer now or save it for the next session and cover it with everyone? All right. Well, I hope I helped somebody. If you guys want to reach out in private and want me to go over your account individually, I'm always up for it. Whenever I have the time, just shoot me a message on Discord or in game, and we'll take a look at your account. It's easiest if you screen share so that I can see what you're talking about, and I can maybe see things that using words takes a lot longer to say, right? But, all right. That's all I got for today. Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Hex. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, it's very good.
Happy to help. All right, everyone. Have a good rest of your day, and yeah,
See you later.
Let me know if there's anything I can help you with.
Thanks, man. See ya.
Great. Thank you.